Hi, I'm Lauren Young, and we are broadcasting live from the Reuters New York newsroom in Times Square, New York City. We don't have any tourists in here, thankfully, but we do have a very handsome man named Julius Reuter. Now, today's chat, today's Facebook Live is all about first jobs. And this guy is the guy who founded the company. And while he can't talk to me to tell me about his first job, I can tell you a little bit about it. We're going to be walking around the Reuters newsroom talking to some of our journalists about their first job stories. And in the comments line, I would love for you to put where you're from and what your very first job was. It could be the one where you got paid off the books or on the books or both of them, but we want to hear your first job tales. So Julius Reuter. This man was a German baron, but before he was a German baron, he was actually named Israel Ber Joseph. And he was born in Germany in July of 1816, so it's almost his birthday. Happy birthday, Julius. And he worked at an uncle's bank in Germany, and he got really interested while he was there. He met a scientist, and he was really interested in the whole issue of sending information over electronic airwaves. Now, this is, the 1800s. It's a different time. It's, pre-Wi-Fi, obviously. And in those days, to get news across the world, you had to do different things. Julius Reuter is famous for using carrier pigeons to send news and stock prices from Germany to other markets around the world so that people knew what was going on. I wanted to start off our first jobs, very first Facebook Live, with this guy, because without him, I wouldn't have this job today, and neither would anybody here. So thank you very much, Julius. It was great talking to you. He's such a hipster, by the way. Look at those lamb chops. He would be really cool in Brooklyn today. So we're going to go in the Reuters newsroom now. Come with me. And while we're walking, why are we talking about first jobs? Well, tomorrow is the all-important employment report. This is the thing that everyone watches. Well, I'm standing outside the ladies' room, so we'll keep walking. It's the thing that everyone watches to talk about what's going on in the economy, because without jobs, there's no money and people can't spend anything. So we're going to be looking tomorrow at the May employment report. And, people are predicting that the employment rate, well, I'm going to keep walking, is going down. So that's good. Unemployment rate, excuse me. And it's probably going to drop a little bit according to some of the Reuters forecasts. So I'm going to be walking into the newsroom now. This is part of the Reuters newsroom. And I'm going to be going over to my colleague, Bethel. Come with me. Bethel, you there? Nope. Bethel, she's here. Come on. Bethel, hi. Welcome.
Hello.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lauren Young. I am broadcasting live from the Reuters newsroom, and I'm talking to Reuters journalists about their first job stories. Bethel, introduce yourself. Tell people what you do and who you are.
Hello, my name is Bethel. I work on .com. I'm a fellow here, and I also work on podcasts. So we're putting out our podcast called War College Next. And what else did you want to know?
Okay, one important thing you need to know about Bethel is she's a proud graduate of
Medill,
where I also went to school, Northwestern. Go Cats. Bethel, tell me about your very first job.
my very first job. So I had to get a good job in college. My parents and I worked out a deal where they'd help me out with I'd get some scholarships, got some loans, but the 1 year in particular, my mom covered rent, and I had to pay all of my gas, food, utilities all on my own, and so needed to get this job. Found one where I would be able to look at really cool clothing, and at the time I was probably more hipster than I'd like to admit now, and I got a job at Urban Outfitters.
Urban Outfitters. Okay, now what does a job at Urban Outfitters entail?
It entails looking like you're not trying too hard to look cool, but having a cool vibe about you in the store. And there's actually I'm not kidding. There's a vibes team lead. So making sure everyone had the right kind of like chill spirit about them. I can't make this up. Yeah, so I was on the floors as a sales associate we rotated shifts and did the whole deal, so.
Okay, what did you learn on that job? What was like the lesson you took away from working at an Urban Outfitters? Where was this Urban Outfitters?
This was in Charlottesville, Virginia, so for undergrad I went to University of Virginia, and it was on like the downtown mall strip, really pretty old town. What was my number one lesson? I think There's an aspect of like my favorite word in French is sang-froid. I'm not pronouncing it right, but it's like sang-froid if you just want to pronounce it phonetically. And it's just that sense of like keeping your cool under pressure, even when things are moving really fast and you want to make sure that you just have your head about you, even when you have a lot to do.
Which is good advice when you're broadcasting live from the Reuters newsroom.
Yes, and yeah, and journalism too. I mean,
Thing happened to you. Tell everybody who's watching. And by the way, we're talking about first jobs. Please tell us in the comments line your first job and where you're from. But Bethel, after that job, what happened to you when out into the world?
I went out into the world. I worked there for a year and a half, and for probably that long of time, I would be able to recognize the clothing of people if they had bought that item of clothing at Urban Outfitters. So I'd walk down the street and say, that skirt, I've hung it up about 50 times in my life. And there were always these really cool shirts in the men's section, which no one really liked to be there because it was cold and it had like concrete floors, but all the girls liked to be there because, you know, they could hang out with the guys. But anyway, yeah, I just would be able to say there's a NASA shirt that a lot of people have. It's just like this gray shirt with like a NASA logo. That's from Urban Outfitters. There's this Dr. Pepper, like bright red shirt, and everyone's got that too. I'm trying to think. Let's see. There are just a few things, and you know, they're nice clothing. Some of the brands are nice. I mean, I don't want to talk bad about my old job.
I'm not asking you to talk bad. I'm just talking about your first job story. And we're going to move on. Bethel, thank you so much. She's about to go on vacation. Have a great time. All right, we're going to go talk to some more colleagues about their first jobs. As I mentioned, tomorrow is the all-important jobs report, and they are forecasting that the unemployment rate is going to go down slightly. And what does that mean for the economy? Well, the Federal Reserve is watching the jobs report. That's the thing that they watch more than anything. I mean, obviously, people are watching oil prices and other stuff like that right now, but why the jobs report is so important is it gives the Federal Reserve a gauge of what's going on in the U.S. economy. And if things are heating up too much, as they fear that they might be, well, interest rates could go higher. So that's why we care about the all-important jobs report, which comes out from the Labor Department on the first Friday of every month, which is tomorrow. Now, I've got another great Reuters journalist who has a phenomenal first job story. Conway, you might recognize him because he's on Facebook Live like every minute, basically. Conway, tell us what you do. Introduce yourself and tell us what you do here at Reuters.
My name is Conway G. Gittens. I am a video reporter, and I work on the Reuters TV app, and I've been doing the new Reuters Facebook Lives.
So you've been doing them every day, market reports? What time approximately?
I've been doing market reports for almost 20 years.
No, I meant here on Facebook Live.
Oh, we do it around 10:45 each day.
All right, so you got to tune in 10:45 tomorrow morning because it'll be after the jobs report, which is the reason why we're talking today. We're talking about first jobs, what people's first job stories are. I'm Lauren Young in the Reuters newsroom. Please tell us your first job story, where you're from in the comments line. Conway, tell these people what your very first job was.
My very first job was at McDonald's. I was working, making $3.35 an hour, $3.35 an hour. I did biscuits. I made Big Macs. I worked the bin. I was a fry guy. I cleaned the lobby. I was a cashier. And eventually, one of the managers noticed my handwriting, and he saw that I had nice handwriting, and he pulled me off of the line to do timesheets.
Whoa, okay. So what do you remember most about that job? What lessons have you learned?
Well, despise not the day of small things. It was people talk really bad about the Mick job, but it was my first job. And if you are passionate about whatever job you have, someone will notice how good you are and they'll promote you.
And what of all of the stuff that you made at McDonald's, what's your favorite McDonald's food?
Biscuits, still to this day. Those biscuits, you can't beat them. Nice and salty and fluffy.
And a little sweet.
And now we can have them all day, thanks to breakfast all day. Not that I'm plugging for McDonald's. I'm just saying.
I think everyone here is plugging for their first job. All right, any other takeaways from your first job? Because that's a tough job when you're working the line, when you're frying things. And I've been in a McDonald's, those lights and buzzers and beeping things are going off.
Yeah, it's a hard job. I mean, people think, you're working after school in high school, but you have to be very careful. I mean, there was hot oil with the chicken nuggets, with the French fries. People got burned, flipping hamburgers and stuff like that. So although it was like what people may consider a low-level job, you think of, you're doing your homework, you're going out and play, and or your friends are going out and play, and you're slaving behind behind a grill. So it was a tough job.
Thank you, Conway. All right, we're going to move on. So here at Thomson Reuters, there's about 60,000 employees. All of them have a first job story. I probably won't get to all of them in this series, but the plan is to come to you once a month on right before the first Friday of every month, which is right before the jobs report, to talk to some more people about their first job stories. And now we're going to go back into the newsroom and find a few more people. So Malati, haha. Hi, Malati. Malati, please introduce yourself to the people of Facebook Live who are tuning in to hear about first job stories. We're asking them to put their name and add a comment about their first job story and where they're from, but tell me a little bit about you and where you're from and your first job story.
Sure. I'm Malati Nayak. I'm the telecoms correspondent for Reuters. So I had actually been covering the Verizon strike, which impacted the unemployment rate from last month. So yeah, that's what I do at Reuters. Yeah.
And you are not from New York City. Where were you born?
I was born and raised in Bangalore, India, in the south of India, and I've lived in the U.S. about 7 years now.
And what was your first job? It was in Bangalore, correct?
Yes, I was in Bangalore when I was an undergraduate student. I worked at a nonprofit as a program coordinator and coordinated some programs like a dance therapy program for children with HIV and AIDS. And I also coordinated a reading session for children who were in government schools near slum areas in Bangalore.
Now, Malati, it's not that easy to get a first job, right? When you're young in Bangalore, why is that?
So I see that in the U.S., a lot of young people take up jobs, say, at a McDonald's or at a retail store. But
wait, we just talked to two of them.
Yeah, but somehow in India, there's so many people, and a lot of people need jobs. So it's a lot of young people typically wouldn't do a summer job, say at a retail store, because there's perhaps someone else who really needs it. So yeah, but you look for other stuff. There's a lot of things going on otherwise.
What would you say is the biggest lesson you learned from your first job working with people who obviously needed something very special?
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway for me, I don't even remember actually what my first paycheck was, but I think the biggest takeaway for me was, the courage and with which these children, like some of them were battling deadly diseases, some of them, came from families with economic distress, but they were so brave and they smiled all the time, and I think that's what I took away from it. Just the fact that I learned to be positive and optimistic, no matter, what life threw at me.
She's still like that today in the Reuters newsroom. Do you think Verizon strike's going to impact the jobs report this month? Well, it would be the May jobs report.
Oh yeah, so the strike just ended, so I believe it will have an impact on the May jobs report for sure. So we'll have to see how that goes. But the strike has ended. The workers got back to work on June 1st, so things are slowly getting back to normal there.
All right, I'm going to let you get back to normal and go back to your real job. Thank you, Malati. All right, Robert McMillan. Stand up. Another colleague here. All right, so Robert McMillan, introduce yourself and tell people what you actually do here at Reuters.
So I am the editor of Reuters.com Global Editions. That means I'm one of the people who helps run the Reuters website here in America and also in India.
And what is your amazing first job story?
My first job story is...
By the way, this man has lots of amazing stories. So.
I went to work for myself. When I was about 10 years old, actually, I made my own newspaper on the copy machine of the library. It cost 6 cents a copy, and I quickly realized I could make money if I charged all the old ladies in the neighborhood a quarter. So I did that until I got bored and didn't have anything left to write about. My first job working for someone else, I was a busboy, and I was a dishwasher in a small restaurant in Haddonfield, New Jersey.
Tell me about the people you worked with there in Facebook Live appropriate language.
I worked mainly in a very small kitchen, about as close as we are now, but back to back, with a chef who was he was a struggling country music songwriter, and he also he frequently had a little bit of cocaine with him at his stove, which he would then sort of take a bit of whenever he was irritated, and it would sort of pick him up.
How old were you?
I was 15.
Oy, okay, that's young.
He was probably in his mid-40s, and he worked the stove, and I was at the sink, and he would sniff all day long, and we'd listen to 94 YSP, classic rock radio, And I spent most of my time cleaning lipstick traces off coffee mugs and digging out cigarettes from lunch plates.
Now, are you a good tipper because of your experience working in a restaurant?
I am. I anger everybody I go out with because I tip so obscenely that they begin to feel guilty and say, "Why do you do that?" And I
So
say,
obscenely
"I can't help
is
it. I can't help it. Obscenely is-"
50%?
No, it depends on the service. I think if it's a pretty small amount of money that you're spending to begin with, then you should tip high. Like, don't tip a dime on something that's going to cost you $1, like a cup of coffee, right? You should tip, add another dollar in, something like that. There's no harm in doing that.
Robert, thank you for sharing your first job story with all the nice people on Facebook Live.
For sure.
For those who are just joining, I'm Lauren Young. I'm live from the Reuters newsroom. We're talking about first job stories. We're asking you to include your first job story and where you're from in the comments line. We're going to visit, I think, one or two more colleagues. So come on further into the newsroom now. And as I mentioned, that all-important jobs report is tomorrow, which is why we're doing this in the first place. And we have got an amazing first job story. I think this may, in fact, be my favorite one. And it involves something I don't think I will ever do in my lifetime, but maybe one of you will. Rance, come on over. Hi. Rance Pearson, this is Facebook Live. We're talking about first jobs. And could you just introduce yourself, tell people what you do here at Reuters?
Brant Pearson, and I cover pharmaceuticals, biotech, and new drugs coming out.
So he's been very, very busy, and we're very lucky to have him right now. Rance, tell us about, okay, he also has a charming accent, and that's because you're from?
Louisiana.
Which has to do with your first job. Rance, tell us about your first job.
My first job when I was about 18, I worked offshore. A lot of people in Louisiana work offshore because we made a lot of money in a very quick time because you go offshore for 3 weeks and work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then you would come back to land for 1 week. So you were offshore three weeks, and so you couldn't spend money because most of the summer you were offshore. But I was on a barge that laid pipelines for natural gas. Huge project. We were 100 miles out in the Gulf, and about 250 people lived on our barge. It was actually
Was it people or was it all guys?
all guys.
Not the guys aren't people, but you know what I mean. It's 200 guys.
Right. No, it wasn't really gender fair back in those days. I'm sure there are women now. But about 250 of us living on like a 3-level barge, huge. Every day we had steak and shrimp and great food. And we basically were building a natural gas pipeline that started about 100 miles out in the Gulf, and then you would weld pieces of pipe together and slide them over the barge into the Gulf of Mexico. And over time, you had a natural gas pipeline. It was a really interesting job because we worked from noon to midnight, and at midnight we could all go deep sea fishing. There was a boat always ready for us after our shift, and so it was great. You would go out to an abandoned oil platform and catch barracuda and red snapper and these wonderful fish, which they would freeze for you, and you could take them home when it was time to go back. And I made about $500 a week, which was huge money, back then. And it largely paid for college. I had to take some student loans, but nothing great. But it wasn't nearly as dangerous as being on an oil rig where you're drilling. There were some dangers. People got hurt, but the oil rigs were far more dangerous.
What would you say is the biggest lesson from that experience that you take away from your very first real job, I guess?
I guess one lesson is that you can really have fun in your job because it really was a great opportunity because you were learning every day, not only about, how to make a natural gas pipeline, but also the geography and being out there with nature by yourself sometimes early in the morning. So it taught me also the value of work because it paid for all my education. And then luckily I wasn't strapped with school loans, like kids are today because tuitions were not so high back then. But it was a terrific job. And there were other jobs related to that in future summers as well.
Do you know what happened to any of the other guys that were on the oil rig with you?
A lot of them were Cajuns, crazy Cajuns. South Louisiana with the really funny accents that kind of talk like that. How you doing? And they're always playing tricks on you. Like one trick was they would tie your belt loop with a piece of cord and then tie it off to a really strong rail. And then they would announce an emergency that, like I'm needed at the front of the boat as quickly as possible. So then your pants practically fly off. And they're always playing jokes on you. Many of them were older than me, so I have lost track with them.
It's okay. This is a great first job story. Anything else you think is important to know about working on an oil rig? Do you think it's changed a lot, or do you think it's pretty much the same today?
I think it's probably easier. It was easier for me being young because I really wasn't afraid of anything, and it's quite dangerous. I saw a lot of people who could have been killed that summer, but I think when you're younger, you're just more fearless and able to tackle exciting adventures. So I think I was lucky that I did it at that age. As a middle-aged person or older, a lot of them were. I think that the dangers mount over time, and I think I'd be more reluctant to have that job, beyond just a few years.
So that's an amazing first job story. Now, you've been at Reuters for how long?
20 years?
20 years. Which is hard to believe because look how young he is.
Which is an adventure every day, too, of course.
And fun.
Yeah, it's a different type of adventure. This one is like drug discovery and we're just speaking to a researcher for cancer, very incredible new cancer drugs, new heart drugs. So that's a whole new frontier that's very exciting.
And I actually sit across from Rand, so I get to hear about these things every day. Thank you so much, Rand.
You keep me out of bankruptcy.
I keep him out of bankruptcy.
Your money advice.
That's right. Free personal finance advice right here from the Reuters newsroom. I'm Lauren Young. Thank you so much for joining us on Facebook Live today. We'll be coming back next month, right before it'll be the June jobs report, but tomorrow we're going to hear the all-important May jobs report. We're going to find out how many jobs the economy added. It could be 160,000. It could be less. And we could see the employment rate drop to 4.9%, and we could see the Federal Reserve raising interest rates later this summer. I'm Lauren Young. This is Reuters.